Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So today we're going to be having a presentation by Joshua and Abhishek, who are both masters of data science students here at Texas A&M University, and they will be presenting over data visualization in R. And in the presentation, they will discuss the essentials of data visualization, focusing on both accessibility and practical implementation. They'll cover the importance of transforming complex data into easy to understand visuals, such as bar charts, line graphs, scatter plots, and heat maps. They will also highlight accessibility principles, ensuring their visuals are inclusive and compliant. They'll also be going through some R code and generating some various plots for as examples. So, whenever you guys are ready, go ahead. Hey, huh?
Yeah, so as Jacob mentioned, today's topic is data visualization part. We'll start with some basic introduction of what visualization means, and then we'll dive into how we can make our visuals more accessible, and we'll also go through some implementation in R. Okay, so what is data visualization? I'm sure all of you have seen visuals before, encountered those. So in the most basic term, data visualization is the graphical representation of some information, some underlying data. So in this example, you can see we have the weekly temperature in a city, and we have just created a simple line chart based on this graph. So with this particular graph, you can see the daily trends of the temperature much easier compared to when we are looking at the table itself. So this is one of the major benefits of using the data visual, that we can see the underlying trend with just a glance. Similarly, we have also shown some other graphs here. So like this one. So this is the maximum temperature variation over an entire year, actually over 4 years in Seattle. So we can just at a glance we can see how seasonality is changing within a year, how the temperature is increasing within the summer, and then how they decrease, and how this is repeated over multiple years. Similarly, in this the geographical representation of temperature, we can see how in the southern states temperature is considerably higher when compared to the northern states. And there are also some minor considerations that you can see, like in the mountain ranges, you can see that temperatures are considerably lower compared to the surrounding areas. So yeah, these are the basic benefits of why we want to use visuals. And I also want to point out another thing here, that within both these charts, it's very easy to see the overarching trends. But what is not obvious is if we want to get the precise data at any point. So if we want the exact temperature at any date or the exact temperature for any city, that would not be obvious here. So if we want the granular information, maybe tabular representation might be more suitable. But if we want to see the overarching trends, data visuals are there. They can help us. So moving on to accessibility. So within the context of data visualization, accessibility ensures that our content is presentable to bigger audience and even to those who have some disabilities. So first of all, why should we even consider ourselves with accessibility? So there are certain benefits, like first of all, it increases the inclusivity and fairness. So for example, if our research impacts a large group of audience, then we want that group of audience to be included when we present it. So this is one of the key points why we want our visuals to be accessible. In addition, there are also some legal standards that we might need to comply with, especially if we are presenting the data to some government organization and such. And finally, it also expands the reach of and the scope of our data. So, depending on our audience, our scope of research might increase based on if our visuals are accessible. So, in the next few slides, I'll just go through some basic points of some consideration that we make to make our visuals more accessible. And so first, choice of colors. So yeah, so color are one of the major reasons why data visuals are so accessible. So why they make so much impact. So for instance, in these charts, you can see that some issue is there's some issue due to the way the colors are interacting. So this is one of the major thing we always need to be in consideration, that how different colors interact with each other. So for instance, we have to take into account the contrast of between background and foreground. So you see, this can improve the legibility of the data and also make it less painful for any audience. Another point is the brightness of chart components. So we want to ensure that color is not the only discriminator between the different chart components. This will help make our charts more accessible to colorblind, and yeah, this also increases the impact of the data. So you can see the here in the left chart, the brightness was similar for all the components, but we have modified it so that the brightness changes with the different components and make it more accessible. Second point would be about the text. So simple and familiar fonts are always the best. Sans serif fonts are always recommended. The reason being that they make the text more legible, and also they don't distract the audience much from what we actually want to say. Hierarchy of text size and formatting can also help us. So if we want our audience to just glance through our report without going through every single point, just creating some kind of standardized hierarchy will help them to go through the actual points that they want to get to. Final 2 points like sufficient spacing and consistent alignment will also help in the readability of the data, which can make it much more impactful when going through it. Descriptive labeling. So as you can see in this chart, there is no way to actually understand what it's saying without any further context. And if we want our graphs to be impactful without having further context, it's very important to label them perfectly. So here we have added some labels within x-axis and y-axis, and also added some legends to ensure that the audience can understand what this graph represents with just the visual itself without needing any further context. Utilizing patterns. So as I mentioned before, we want to ensure that the color is not the sole distinguisher between chart components. So patterns is also something we can use in spite of to ensure that these are also accessible to colorblind. So you can see here that different chart components, we are using different textures to distinguish between them, which will help to make it more accessible. Similarly, in this line chart, we have used two different textures, solid lines as well as dashed lines, to distinguish between the different trends. Standardized template. So the point I mentioned at this until this point, it might be too much to go through everything in all of the reports. So standardized templates can help us with ensuring all of the accessibility points are met without us actually having to go through it. Like we don't actually need to see if different components are contrasting enough if we just use standardized template, because they are already using standardized colors and logo which are easy to follow. So some other benefits of using standardized templates are it ensures consistency across different projects within the same organization. It also helps audiences to identify where the research came from just from the template itself. And as I mentioned before, it also saves time by reducing design decisions. Uh, okay, so now Josh will take over and he'll walk you through some implementation we have done for these points within our.
Howdy everyone, I am Joshua and I'll be going through how did we implement the visuals in R. So before that, let me just show you the building blocks of visualizations. So for creating any visual, we need data, you know,
the input, we need to assign the mappings, what goes on the y-axis and what on the x-axis, and map variables according to color or shape and so on. And we also need to specify the geometric representation, whether we need a point plot or a bar plot, and adding labels and theme finally. And okay, for this example, we will be using the library ggplot. It is a very widely used library for data visualization in R. In the data, we are using this iris dataset. It is available within the R language in the dataset library. And those who are not familiar with the iris dataset, it is just basically the sepal and petal height and width of various flowers. Also showing which species they belong to, and we have created mappings between sepal length and sepal width, and we are going to create here a scatter plot, and then we have added labels and theme. So the iris data set looks kind of like this. So we have the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width, and here are the species where they belong to. There are about 150 records and 5 features. So in ggplot, we gave the data and the mappings. Then we can expect something like this. There is no actual data because we didn't tell the ggplot what type of graph we need. So we can just simply tell we need a scatter plot or a point plot in this case of size 5, and we can expect an output like this. And we can also differentiate based on the species. So we can do the color equal to species mapping, and we can get something like this. And the next thing would be to add a label and a theme. Just use the labs function with the keyword title to add a label. And we have used the theme HHSA. HHSA essentially means Texas Health and Human Services. They have a set of predefined patterns and colors which can make the graph more accessible. So we have used that theme and we get a final output something like this. So I will also be walking you through some examples. Yeah, looking at this code, you might feel kind of overwhelmed, but it is essentially the building blocks which we have discussed before. Essentially loading the data, creating mappings. It is geometrical representation. Here we are creating a patterned bar plot for each country. Each country name would have a different type of pattern, and the data set we used is economics 2020, where the GDP of each country in the year 2020 will be shown. Yeah, and then we are adding the label using labs function, and finally with themes, yeah, we get we get an outcome like this. So we can see that each country has its own pattern and its color, and we can see in the legend also which country has a corresponding pattern. Yeah. And again, few other plots here. So this is the entire economics. Previously we had seen only for the year 2020, but it is for a lot of years, and we did use mapping here. In the year as x-axis and GDP in billions in the y-axis, and we did color by country name, and we did group them by country name to get a straight line. We are creating a line plot and a point plot, and we did use labs function to denote the title, and we did use theme, and we get an outcome something like this. Our main goal is to make the graph as much as accessible as possible. So we use different types of patterns and colors.
Yeah, so this concludes our presentation. Any questions or anything?